imagine everything is just stripped away, like your job, your clothes, family, even your name. You just get handed a number.
Right, the absolute bare minimum of existence.
Yeah. And in that total devastating void, what keeps a human being actually stepping forward?
Well, it is basically the ultimate tragic stress test of the human psyche. I mean, when life is reduced to absolute deprivation, that is what reveals our underlying psychological machinery.
Exactly. And that question is really the beating heart of Viktor Frankl's man's search for meaning. So today we are doing a deep dive into the actual mechanics of his philosophy.
Right, acting as educators here. We want to deeply analyze the core philosophy, using therapeutic guides and academic papers, not just summarize the history.
Yes, looking past the history to see what modern therapy thinks of his conclusions today. So what is the gist here?
To give it to you in 2 sentences, Frankl argues that the primary human drive is the will to meaning.
The will to meaning, okay.
Yeah, he claims that even in the most horrific circumstances imaginable, humans still retain the ultimate freedom to choose their attitude.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Frankl is explicitly throwing a wrench into the dominant psychology of his time, right?
Oh, absolutely. He was going right up against Sigmund Freud.
Right, because Freud argued humans are driven by the will to pleasure. Like, we basically suppress animalistic aggression just to fit into culture.
Yeah, and then Alfred Adler pushed the will to power.
Exactly. But Frankl says, no, we are ultimately self-determining. We are driven by meaning, and happiness isn't something you can just aim at.
Right, if you aim directly at happiness, you miss.
It is honestly exactly like chasing sleep.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Right. Like if you lay in bed intensely trying to force yourself to sleep, you will just be wide awake all night. Sleep, just like happiness, has to be a side effect. It must ensue, not be pursued.
Right, it ensues.
But I do have to push back a little here. I mean, I have to wonder how much of this was factual, biological reality, and how much was just Frankl being, a rebellious 1920s intellectual trying to stick it to Freud's determinism.
Well, that distinction is actually crucial. Analytically speaking, Frankl's will to meaning operates a lot more as a philosophical framework than a hard, verified biological fact.
Okay, so it is a bit speculative.
Yeah, I mean, modern research definitely shows having a sense of purpose correlates with lower depression. But the idea that we are completely consciously self-determining in every single moment, well, that is highly speculative.
Right. And when that self-determined meaning is missing, Frankl says we fall into what he calls the existential vacuum.
The existential vacuum, yeah.
For you listening, think of that Sunday evening dread. Like, you have a successful career, you are relatively comfortable, but you sit on the couch as the weekend ends and you just think, is this really it?
Yes, that is the exact feeling. He is saying affluence without purpose basically creates an intense inner emptiness.
So how does he say we fill it?
Well, Frankl claims meaning is found via 3 concrete pathways. First, creating a work or doing a deed. Second, experiencing something or encountering someone.
Like through deep love.
Exactly, experiencing love. And the third path is choosing your attitude toward unavoidable suffering.
Wow. But wait, if the goal isn't happiness, does that mean our modern obsession with self-care and stress reduction is actually making us more miserable, at least according to Frankl?
He would argue, yes, absolutely. He actually called the mechanics behind this new dynamics. New comes from the Greek word for mind.
New dynamics, okay.
Think of it like a suspension bridge. A bridge doesn't stay up because it is completely relaxed, right? It stays up because the structural tension between the pillars.
Oh, so tension is actually necessary.
Exactly. Mental health isn't about homeostasis or like a completely tensionless state. It requires a dynamic polar pull between who you are right now and who you have the responsibility to become.
But wait, if new dynamics relies entirely on your internal responsibility, doesn't that create a pretty massive blind spot?
How so?
I mean, if you are entirely responsible for your reaction to suffering, what happens when the suffering is an insurmountable systemic force, like, well, a concentration camp?
That is exactly the major flaw critics point out. The danger of Frankl's theory is really how it scales.
Right, because if we accept the premise that surviving a tragedy is just a matter of choosing the right mindset, that gets dark fast.
Very dark. The unintended mathematical inverse of that is that anyone who dies must have chosen the wrong mindset.
Wow. Yeah, that is a heavy implication.
Right. Scholar Richard Middleton Kaplan actually points out that this accidentally implies victims who perished simply gave up.
Which completely ignores the random mechanical brutality of who lived and who died. Like a shift in attitude could not stop a bullet or cure starvation.
Exactly. And scholar Lawrence Langer takes that critique a step further. He points out that Frankl's detached clinical tone when describing survival can feel deeply inhumane.
I can see that.
There is a much broader debate here about the limits of highly individualistic philosophies. When you apply them universally, it risks victim blaming.
Right, assuming oppressed or marginalized people can simply think their way out of suffering.
Exactly, ignoring the crushing weight of real-world conditions. These claims are still fiercely debated today.
So it is a really complex balance. On one hand, Frankl's logotherapy offers a highly convincing, empowering framework for modern anxieties. It gives us a way to bridge that existential vacuum.
But on the other hand, its historical generalizations are speculative and require careful verification. They really shouldn't be used to dismiss systemic injustice.
So realistically, what should we take away from this?
The core takeaway is that meaning is a really powerful lens for examining your own life. But claiming total freedom of attitude, well, that carries an incredibly heavy burden of responsibility.
Which brings us to a fascinating thought Frankl left us with. He suggested that because freedom requires responsibility, the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast should actually be balanced by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast.
A statue of responsibility, that really frames it perfectly.
It does. So for you listening, if you are holding your own blank slate, stripped down to just a number, what does your statue of responsibility actually look like? How does that alter your search for meaning today?